You think you're somebody? You're nothing! Just a worthless gateman who should be grateful we even let you stand at our entrance! Get out of the way!
The words cut through the morning air like a knife as a well-dressed executive towered over the elderly security guard, his finger jobbing accusingly at the old man's chest. The guard, his uniform worn and faded, trembled as he tried to explain that he was simply following protocol by asking for the executive's ID badge. But the abuse didn't stop. The executive's face twisted with contempt as he continued his verbal assault, each word dripping with venom and superiority. Do you know who I am? I'm the vice president of operations. I could have you fired with one phone call. I could make sure you never work in this city again. You're a nobody, an insect, and you dare to question me? Other employees walking past averted their eyes. Some hurried their pace. Others pretended to be absorbed in their phones. Nobody intervened. Nobody said a word. This scene of humiliation and degradation was just another Tuesday morning at Technocore Industries, one of the most successful technology companies in the country. But what nobody knew, what nobody could possibly imagine, was that someone was watching. Someone who would remember every word, every gesture, every moment of cruelty. Standing just 30 feet away, dressed in an identical faded security uniform, holding a worn clipboard and pretending to check vehicle registrations, was Marcus Chen. Not Marcus Chen, the security guard, not Marcus Chen, the temporary worker, but Marcus Chen, the billionaire founder and CEO of Technocore Industries itself. The man who had built this empire from nothing. The man whose face appeared on magazine covers and business journals. The man whose signature appeared on every contract, every major decision, every policy document in the entire company. And he was watching his own executives abuse the very people who made his company function. The question burning in his mind, the question that would drive everything that followed, was simple but devastating. How did my company become this? How did the values I built it on disappear so completely that my own executives feel empowered to treat human beings like garbage? But here's what will shock you even more. What Marcus was about to discover over the next 6 weeks would reveal a truth so dark, a conspiracy so deep, and a system of exploitation so comprehensive that it would shake the foundations of everything he thought he knew about his own company. The abuse he witnessed that morning, that was just the tip of the iceberg. What lay beneath would change everything. Marcus Chen hadn't always been a billionaire. 35 years ago, he had been exactly like the people he was now disguising himself among, the son of immigrants who had sacrificed everything to give him a chance at a better life. His father had worked as a janitor in a tech company while his mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. Young Marcus had watched his parents come home exhausted every night, their hands rough and calloused, their spirits somehow still unbroken, despite the casual disrespect they faced daily from those who considered themselves superior. He remembered with crystal clarity the day his father came home with tears in his eyes, not from sadness, but from humiliation. A manager had made him clean the same bathroom 3 times, finding imaginary spots each time, doing it in front of a group of laughing employees who treated the whole thing as entertainment. His father had said nothing, done nothing, just cleaned it again and again, because they needed the money. That memory had burned itself into Marcus's soul. It became the driving force behind everything he would later build. When Marcus founded Technocore Industries 23 years ago, he had sworn a sacred oath to himself. His company would be different. His company would treat every employee from the CEO to the janitor with dignity and respect. He had written it into the company's founding documents, into every policy manual, into the very DNA of the organization. Every human being who contributes to our success deserves respect, fair compensation, and the opportunity to grow. Those weren't just words on paper to him. They were commandments carved in stone. And for the first 15 years, he had believed he was succeeding. Technocore had grown from a small startup in a garage to a multinational corporation with over 50,000 employees. The company was valued at $38 billion. It had revolutionized cloud computing, artificial intelligence integration, and cybersecurity systems. Marcus himself had become one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country, his personal wealth estimated at $12.4 billion. But success has a way of creating distance. As the company grew, Marcus found himself increasingly isolated in the executive suite on the 45th floor. His days filled with board meetings, investor calls, strategic planning sessions, and high-level negotiations. He still read reports about employee satisfaction, still reviewed the human resources data, still made speeches about company values. But somewhere along the way, he had lost touch with the reality on the ground. He had delegated day-to-day operations to executives he trusted, or so he thought. The wake-up call came 6 weeks ago in the most unexpected way. Marcus's mother, now 78 years old and suffering from advancing dementia, had looked at him during one of his visits and said something that cut straight to his heart. She didn't recognize him as her son in that moment. Instead, she looked at him in his expensive suit and designer watch and said, "You're one of them now, the ones who think they're better than everyone else. My son would never become like that." Those words haunted him for days. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't focus on work. He kept thinking about his parents, about the values they had instilled in him, about the promises he had made to himself all those years ago. And he began to wonder, had he become exactly what he once despised? Had his company, despite all the policies and procedures he had put in place, become just another corporation where the powerful exploited the powerless? He decided he needed to know the truth. Not the sanitized version that appeared in reports, not the carefully curated information that executives presented in boardroom meetings, the real truth. The only way to get that truth was to go where he had never gone before, to see what he had never seen, to experience what his lowest-level employees experienced every single day. That's when he made the decision that would change everything. He would go undercover in his own company. Not as an executive conducting a surprise inspection, not as the CEO doing a publicity stunt, but as a real employee at the very bottom of the hierarchy. Someone completely invisible to the power structure. Someone who experienced the full weight of the system without any protection or privilege. He chose the position of security guard, specifically the night shift gateman at the main entrance. It was perfect. Security guards saw everything but were rarely noticed. They interacted with employees at all levels but were considered so beneath consideration that people spoke and acted freely around them as if they didn't exist. If there was rot in his company, if the values he cherished had been corrupted, the security post would be ground zero for witnessing it. The preparation took 2 weeks. He worked with exactly 3 people who knew the truth. His personal attorney, who helped create the legal framework in false identity, his oldest friend from college, who owned a security company and could fabricate employment records, and his executive assistant of 15 years, who would manage his public schedule and make excuses for his absence. That was it. Nobody else could know, especially not the executives running day-to-day operations. If word got out, if anyone suspected, the whole operation would be compromised. Marcus Chen grew out his beard and let it turn gray. He wore colored contact lenses to change his eye color. He gained 20 pounds intentionally to change his appearance. He practiced speaking with a different accent, adopting the speech patterns of the working-class neighborhood where he had grown up. He studied how to walk differently, how to carry himself with the slightly stooped posture of someone who had worked manual labor for decades. The transformation was so complete that when he looked in the mirror, even he barely recognized himself. His cover story was simple and believable. Marcus Chen would be on an extended business trip to Asia for 6 weeks, visiting international offices and meeting with partners. Meanwhile, his alter ego, Michael Chang, a 62-year-old man who had recently moved to the city to be closer to his daughter, would start his new job as a night security guard at Technocore Industries. Michael's employment records showed 20 years of security work at various companies. His references were solid. His background check came back clean. To everyone at Technocore, he would be just another face in a uniform, another worker bee in the vast hive, completely beneath notice. On a Monday evening in late September, Marcus Chen drove his ordinary sedan into the employee parking lot of his own company headquarters. But it wasn't Marcus Chen arriving. It was Michael Chang, arriving 2 hours early for his first night shift, nervous and eager to make a good impression on his new employer. He wore the basic security uniform provided by the company, carried a cheap lunchbox his assistant had purchased at a discount store, and walked with the careful steps of a man who couldn't afford to lose his job. The shift supervisor, a tired-looking man named Rodriguez who had worked security for 12 years, barely glanced at him. Chang? Right. Night gate duty. Pretty simple. Check IDs, log vehicles, don't let anyone unauthorized enter. Stay awake, stay alert, don't screw up. Questions? Marcus, now fully in character as Michael, nodded respectfully. No, sir. Thank you, sir. I'll do my best. Rodriguez handed him a worn radio, a clipboard with a vehicle log sheet, and a flashlight that flickered when you shook it. Gate 3 is yours. Thompson will show you the basics. Good luck. And just like that, Marcus Chen, Billionaire CEO, became Michael Chang, night shift security guard earning $12.50 per hour. The security gate booth was smaller than Marcus had imagined, just a cramped square structure with a sliding glass window, a single stool that wobbled, a space heater that barely worked, and a view of the employee entrance. It was late September, and the nights were getting cold. The booth had no insulation. Marcus could see his breath forming small clouds in the air as he sat down for the first time. Thompson, the guard he was replacing, was a young man in his mid-20s who looked exhausted despite it only being 7 in the evening. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he yawned continuously as he showed Marcus the ropes. "It's simple, man," Thompson explained, his words slightly slurred from fatigue. "Most people leaving now already showed their IDs coming in, so just waving through. Anyone coming in after hours needs to show their badge and you log it here. Security executives have the gold badges. They don't need to show ID. Just let them pass. Regular employees, check the badge and write it down. Visitors need to call whoever they're visiting for approval. Got it?" Marcus nodded, but something in Thompson's explanation bothered him. Wait, security executives don't need to show ID? Why not? Thompson laughed bitterly. Because they'll make your life hell if you ask. Trust me, I learned that the hard way. Just let the gold badges through, don't ask questions, don't make eye contact. They hate dealing with us. But company policy says everyone shows ID for security logs, Marcus said carefully, knowing this because he had personally approved that policy. Thompson's expression shifted to something between pity and warning. Look, old man, I'm trying to help you out here. Company policy and actual policy are two different things. You follow the written policy, you'll be written up for insubordination and fired within a week. You follow the actual policy, the one the executives enforce, you keep your job. Your choice. The young guard left, and Marcus sat alone in his booth, processing what he had just heard. Written policy versus actual policy. He had created written policies designed to ensure fairness and security, but apparently there was a shadow system, an unwritten code that directly contradicted everything he had established, and it started with something as simple as ID badges. The first few hours were quiet. Employees trickled out, most barely acknowledging his existence. A few nodded, some didn't even look at him, just held up their badges while talking on their phones or to each other. He was invisible to them, a piece of furniture that happened to occupy the security booth. Marcus found this fascinating and disturbing. These people worked for a company he had built, yet they couldn't even spare a moment of basic human acknowledgement for the person protecting their workplace. Around 9:30, a black Mercedes pulled up to the gate. The window rolled down, revealing a man Marcus recognized immediately. James Hartford, Vice President of Human Resources. A man Marcus had personally promoted 3 years ago. A man he had trusted to uphold the company's values and treat employees fairly. a man who now sat in his luxury car looking at Marcus with barely concealed contempt. "ID, please, sir," Marcus said politely, following proper protocol. Hartford's expression darkened. "Are you new?" "Yes, sir, first night." "Then let me educate you quickly. See this badge?" He held up the gold executive badge. "This means you don't ask me for anything. You open the gate and you thank me for my time. Understand?" Marcus maintained his composure. "Sir, company policy requires all employees to show photo ID for the security log. I just need to verify your identity and record your entry time." What happened next would stay with Marcus forever. Hartford's face contorted with rage. He threw his car into park, stepped out, and walked directly to the booth window. His voice dropped to a threatening whisper. "Listen to me very carefully, old man. I am company policy. I write the policies. I decide who gets written up and who gets fired. And right now you're about 30 seconds away from being unemployed. I don't show my ID to minimum wage security guards. I don't explain myself to people who couldn't get a real job. Now open this gate or I'll have you removed from the property." Marcus felt his blood boiling. This man who he had promoted and trusted, who made over $300,000 a year in salary and bonuses, who claimed to uphold human resources policies, was threatening an elderly security guard for doing his job correctly. But Marcus couldn't break character. Not yet. He needed to see more, learn more, understand how deep this corruption ran. "I apologize, sir," Marcus said, his voice shaking slightly with suppressed anger that Marcus would interpret as fear. "I'm just trying to follow the rules." "The rules are what I say they are," Hartford snapped. He pulled out his phone and made a call, never taking his eyes off Marcus. "Rodriguez, it's Hartford. Your new night guy at Gate 3 is giving me problems. Handle it." He hung up and smiled coldly. "You'll learn quickly or you won't be here long." Hartford got back in his car and Marcus, fighting every instinct, opened the gate. The Mercedes drove through without another word. 5 minutes later, Marcus's radio crackled to life. "Chang, this is Rodriguez. What happened with Hartford?" Marcus explained exactly what had occurred, how he had simply followed the written security protocols by asking for identification. There was a long pause. Then Rodriguez's tired voice came back. "Look, Chang, I'm going to tell you what nobody told me when I started. The written policies don't matter. The real rule is simple. Gold badges get whatever they want. Don't ask questions, don't verify identity, just open the gate and say thank you. If you can't follow that rule, this job isn't for you." "But that defeats the entire purpose of security," Marcus protested. "If executives don't have to follow protocols, then our security system is meaningless." "Welcome to Technocore," Rodriguez replied, and there was such resignation in his voice that it broke Marcus's heart. "The security system isn't designed to protect the company. It's designed to protect the executives from accountability, from scrutiny, from having to follow the same rules as everyone else. Now, are you going to be a problem, or are you going to keep your head down and collect your paycheck?" Marcus sat in his cold booth, staring at the gate he had just opened for an executive who had threatened him for doing his job correctly. This was hour 4 of his first night, and he had already discovered that the company policies he had written, the values he had embedded in every document, were being systematically ignored and undermined by the very people he had entrusted to uphold them. The rest of that first night passed in a blur of small violations and casual cruelties that Marcus documented in a small notebook he kept hidden in his lunchbox. He watched as 3 more executives passed through without showing ID, each one treating him with varying degrees of dismissiveness and contempt. He observed as a young female employee came back to retrieve something from her desk at 11 p.m. and was subjected to inappropriate comments from a senior manager who happened to be working late. The manager made suggestive remarks about why she was really coming back so late, whether she was meeting someone for a private meeting, and how he'd be happy to keep her company if she was lonely. The young woman hurried past, her face flushed with humiliation. Marcus wanted to intervene, wanted to stop it, wanted to use his authority to fire that manager on the spot, but he couldn't break cover, not yet. He was learning that these weren't isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a disease that had infected his entire organization. By the end of his first week, Marcus had witnessed and documented more than 40 violations of company policy. Executives parking in handicapped spaces, managers berating lower-level employees in ways that would clearly qualify as harassment, security personnel being ordered to ignore safety protocols, maintenance workers being forced to skip mandatory breaks, janitors being treated as invisible, their work criticized but never acknowledged. But the real education came from his fellow security guards. During shift changes and break times, Marcus listened to their stories, and what he heard horrified him. Carlos, a security guard who had worked at Technocore for 8 years, explained how the scheduling system was deliberately designed to prevent guards from qualifying for benefits. "They keep us just under 30 hours a week," Carlos said during one of their breaks. "That way, we're classified as part-time, which means no health insurance, no retirement contributions, no paid vacation. But here's the trick. They schedule us so unpredictably that we can't get a second job. One week I might work 4 10-hour shifts, next week 6 5-hour shifts. It's impossible to plan anything." That can't be legal, Marcus knowing full well that it technically was legal, just morally bankrupt. "Legal doesn't matter when you need to feed your family," Carlos replied. "I've got 3 kids and a wife with diabetes. We do what we have to do." Sarah, the evening shift supervisor who had worked security for 11 years, revealed something even more disturbing. "You know how many security guards have been assaulted by employees or visitors in the last 2 years?" she asked Marcus during a quiet moment. 17. You know how many of those cases led to the attacker being fired or even disciplined? 0, not a single one. "What happened to the guards who were assaulted?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Most of them quit. 2 were fired for failing to de-escalate the situation. One ended up with a permanent back injury and was denied workers' compensation because they claimed he was at fault. The company doesn't protect us. We're expendable. If something goes wrong, we're the ones who take the blame." Marcus learned about the unofficial quota system that forced guards to write up minor violations by lower-level employees while ignoring major violations by executives. He discovered that security reports documenting executive misconduct had a mysterious tendency to disappear before reaching the legal department. He found out that guards who pushed back against unfair treatment or tried to enforce policies equally were systematically scheduled for the worst shifts until they quit. The temperature in his booth dropped below freezing on his 10th night. Marcus was shivering despite wearing multiple layers. He mentioned it to Rodriguez, asking if maintenance could look at the heater. "Been broken for 3 months, Rodriguez said with a shrug. "I've submitted 14 work orders. They keep saying it's not a priority." Meanwhile, executives get individual climate control in their offices with quarterly maintenance checks. "But we're out here all night in freezing weather," Marcus protested. "This is a health and safety issue." "We're security guards, Chang. Our health and safety doesn't matter. You want to know the real joke? The company spent $47,000 last month on new artwork for the executive floor, but they can't afford a $200 heater repair for the security booth? That tells you everything you need to know about priorities." Marcus spent that night documenting exact temperature readings, taking photos with his basic phone, recording the number of work orders that had been submitted and ignored. He was building a case, collecting evidence, but more than that, he was experiencing firsthand the reality that his employees faced. The cold wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. His fingers went numb, his joints ached, his breath came in painful gasps. And this is what his guards endured every night while executives debated which shade of white to paint the boardroom walls. The breaking point came on his 14th night. Marcus was manning the gate when he saw something that made his blood run cold. A delivery truck arrived at 2 in the morning, which was unusual. The driver handed him a manifest for a large shipment going to the executive offices. Marcus, following protocol, called to verify the delivery with the night operations manager. The manager who answered was irritated at being disturbed. Yeah, just let it through. It's authorized. Sir, I need a confirmation number for the log. Company policy requires verification of all after-hours deliveries. Are you seriously questioning me right now? I said it's authorized. Open the gate. Marcus insisted, politely but firmly, that he needed proper authorization. The manager hung up on him. 5 minutes later, James Hartford himself showed up at the gate, the same VP of Human Resources who had threatened Marcus on his first night. You again? Hartford said with disgust. I heard you were still causing problems. This is your last warning. Open the gate for that truck immediately, or you're fired. Sir, I just need proper authorization. It will take 2 minutes. You have 10 seconds to open that gate. Marcus stood his ground. Sir, company policy clearly states. Company policy is what I say it is, Hartford screamed, his face turning red. You're done. You're fired. Security, escort this man off the property immediately. 2 other security guards appeared, looking uncomfortable and apologetic. They knew Marcus was right, knew he was just doing his job, but they also knew they couldn't risk their own positions by defending him. I'm sorry, man, one of them whispered to Marcus as they walked him to collect his things. But you've got to understand, we can't fight them. They always win. Marcus was escorted off the property he owned, fired from a job in the company he had founded for the crime of trying to follow the very policies he had written. As he sat in his car in the parking lot, watching that unauthorized delivery truck drive into his facility without proper documentation, he realized something profound and disturbing. This wasn't incompetence. This wasn't a few bad managers. This was systematic, intentional, organized. The executives had built a parallel company within his company, one that operated by completely different rules. And whatever was in that truck, whatever was being delivered in the middle of the night without proper authorization, was part of something bigger and darker than he had imagined. Getting fired turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to Marcus's investigation, because what he discovered next would only have been possible from the outside, from the network of employees who had been discarded and silenced. Marcus made a decision. Instead of ending his undercover operation, he would expand it. He contacted his attorney and arranged for Michael Chang to receive unemployment benefits and worker protection assistance. He reached out to several of the security guards he had worked with, letting them know he was available if they needed someone to talk to. And he did something he had never done before. He started attending the gatherings where low-level employees met after being fired or forced out of the company. There was a small coffee shop 3 blocks from Technocore headquarters called the Daily Grind. It had become an unofficial meeting place for former employees, a space where people could vent, support each other, and share information about what they had experienced. The owner, a kind woman named Rosa, had even designated Thursday evenings as Survivor Nights, where former Technocore employees could meet for free coffee and conversation. Marcus attended his first Survivor Night 2 days after being fired. He walked into the coffee shop as Michael Chang, just another casualty of corporate callousness, and what he heard there would fundamentally change his understanding of what was happening in his company. There were 11 people there that first night. Their stories shared a disturbing pattern. Maria, a former accounts payable clerk, described how she had been fired for refusing to approve fraudulent expense reports submitted by executives. They were charging personal expenses to the company, she explained. Expensive dinners, luxury hotels, shopping trips. None of it was business-related. When I flagged it for review, I was written up for insubordination. When I persisted, I was terminated for creating a hostile work environment. David, a former IT specialist, revealed that he had been fired for discovering that company data was being accessed and copied by unauthorized users. I reported it through proper channels, I documented everything, but instead of investigating the security breach, they investigated me. They claimed I was accessing systems I wasn't authorized to use, which was absurd since my job was network security. They fired me and made me sign an NDA threatening legal action if I talked about what I found. Jennifer, a former sales representative, broke down crying as she explained how she had been sexually harassed by her manager for 8 months. I reported it to HR. I had emails, text messages, witnesses, but nothing happened. The manager was friends with the executives. Instead of disciplining him, they transferred me to a different department with lower pay. When I complained, they fired me for poor performance. They even fought my unemployment claim. Story after story, person after person, each one revealed another piece of the puzzle. But it was Robert, a former senior accountant who had worked at Technocore for 12 years, who connected all the pieces. "It's not random," Robert said, his voice quiet but certain. "What's happening isn't chaos or poor management, it's deliberate. The executives have built a system where they can funnel company money into their own pockets, where they can operate without oversight, where anyone who questions them gets eliminated. I spent a year trying to track it before they fired me. I documented over $14 million in fraudulent expenses and unauthorized transfers over a 3-year period." Marcus leaned forward. "Did you report this?" "To who?" Robert laughed bitterly. "The CEO? The man is never there. He's always traveling, always in meetings, always too busy to pay attention to what's actually happening in his company. The board? They're handpicked by the executives. HR? They're part of the system. Internal audit? Toothless and controlled by the CFO, who's one of the main perpetrators. There is no one to report it to. The people stealing from the company are the people who would investigate themselves." Marcus felt physically sick. Robert was talking about him, the CEO who was never there, who was too busy, who had let his company be hijacked while he sat in the executive suite reviewing sanitized reports and congratulating himself on his success. "I have documentation," Robert continued. "Spreadsheets, emails, bank transfer records. I kept copies of everything before they fired me. But what am I supposed to do with it? Go to the police? Corporate fraud cases take years and millions in legal fees. Go public? I signed an NDA with teeth. They'll sue me into bankruptcy. I'm trapped. We're all trapped." Marcus looked around the room at these people. Honest employees who had tried to do the right thing and been destroyed for it. How many more were there? How many had been silenced, threatened, discarded? How many had tried to tell him what was happening but couldn't get past the wall of executives surrounding him? Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus attended every survivor night. He met with former employees one-on-one. He collected their documentation, their stories, their evidence. And a picture emerged that was so comprehensive and so damning that it took his breath away. The executives had created what amounted to a criminal enterprise within Technocore Industries. They had built a shadow accounting system that allowed them to approve fraudulent expenses. They had established shell companies that received payments for non-existent services. They had manipulated hiring and firing to eliminate anyone who questioned their activities. They had created a culture of fear and intimidation that kept honest employees silent. The estimated total? Over $43 million stolen from the company over a 5-year period. And this was just what the former employees had been able to document. The real total could be double or triple that amount. Marcus Chen, Billionaire CEO, had been so focused on building his empire, on expanding into new markets, on impressing investors and analysts, that he had failed to notice his own executives were looting the company he had built. The values he thought he had instilled were a facade. The policies he thought were being followed were ignored. The trust he had placed in his leadership team was betrayed. But now he knew. Now he had evidence. Now he had witnesses, and now he was going to do something about it. Among all the people Marcus met during this period, one person stood out: Thomas Williams, a 58-year-old security guard who still worked at Technocore. Thomas had been there for 16 years, longer than almost anyone in the security department. He was the guard Marcus had met briefly during his second week on the job, a quiet man who seemed to notice everything but said little. Thomas reached out to Marcus through Rodriguez, sending a message that he wanted to meet privately. They arranged to meet at a different location, a park bench far from Technocore property during one of Thomas's days off. What Thomas revealed would become the final piece of the puzzle Marcus needed. "I knew who you were from day one," Thomas said quietly, stunning Marcus into silence. "I recognized you despite the beard and the weight and the different way you walked. I've been in security for 33 years. I was trained to notice details, to see through disguises, to identify people even when they don't want to be identified. So when Michael Cheng showed up looking exactly like Marcus Chen would look if he wanted to hide, I knew." Marcus started to respond, but Thomas held up his hand. "I didn't say anything because I wanted you to see. I wanted you to experience what we experience every single day. Because telling you wouldn't have worked. You needed to feel it yourself. The disrespect, the abuse, the systematic violation of every principle you claim to value. You needed to stand in that freezing booth and realize that you're responsible for this." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "I didn't know," he said weakly. "You didn't want to know," Thomas corrected firmly. "You had every opportunity to know. Employees have been trying to tell you for years. We submitted complaints, filed reports, sent emails, but they never reached you because the executives built a wall around you, and you let them. You were comfortable in your tower, comfortable with your reports and your metrics, comfortable believing that everything was fine. You abdicated your responsibility." Marcus felt shame burn through him. Thomas was right. Completely right. "But now you do know," Thomas continued, his voice softening slightly. "Now you've seen it with your own eyes. You've felt what it's like to be powerless, to be treated as less than human, to have your dignity stripped away by people who think their position gives them the right to abuse others. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to fix it," Marcus said with determination. "I'm going to expose what's happening and clean house." "That's what I hoped you'd say," Thomas replied, "because I have something to show you, something that will give you all the ammunition you need." Thomas pulled out a thick folder from his bag. Inside were documents, photographs, recorded conversations, years of carefully collected evidence documenting the executive conspiracy. "I've been investigating this for 6 years," Thomas explained. "Ever since I realized that good people were being systematically forced out while corrupt executives rose higher. I'm not just a security guard, Mr. Chen. I was a military police investigator for 12 years before I retired. I know how to conduct an investigation. I know how to collect evidence. I know how to build a case." The documents were devastating. Thomas had names, dates, amounts. He had documented the shell companies and traced the money flows. He had recordings of executives bragging about their schemes, thinking they were safe because they were talking in front of a mere security guard. He had photographs of documents that were supposed to have been destroyed. He had witness statements from employees who had been too afraid to come forward, but had quietly shared their stories with someone they trusted. "Why didn't you take this to the police?" Marcus asked, paging through the evidence with growing horror. "Because I wanted you to give a chance to fix your company first. I believe in what you built, or what you tried to build. I believe in the values you talked about when you founded Technocore. I think those values are worth fighting for, but I needed you to see the truth first. If you had just received a report, you might have handed it to the executives to investigate themselves. Now you understand that you have to take direct action." Marcus looked at this man, the security guard who had been working quietly for years to protect a company that didn't even respect him. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why did you do all this? You could have just kept your head down, collected your paycheck, and ignored it all." Thomas smiled sadly. "Because my daughter works here. She's an entry-level analyst in the marketing department. She believes in this company. She believes in working hard and being treated fairly. I wanted to make sure the company she believed in actually existed. I wanted to make sure that when she comes to work, she's safe, that she's respected, that her father didn't just stand by while corrupt people destroyed something good. Marcus felt tears in his eyes. Here was a man earning $12.50 an hour who had more integrity and courage than executives making hundreds of thousands. A man who had spent 6 years building a case against corruption, not for personal gain, but to protect his daughter and others like her. "I have a plan," Marcus said, his voice steady with newfound resolve. "But I need your help, and I need the help of everyone who's been wronged. Everyone who has evidence, everyone who's been waiting for someone to actually listen. Can you help me gather them?" Thomas nodded. "I've been waiting for you to ask that question for 6 weeks. The web of corruption revealed. With Thomas's evidence and the documentation from the former employees, Marcus spent 2 weeks conducting his own investigation. He worked with his personal attorney to verify every piece of information, to cross-reference every claim, to build an airtight case that couldn't be dismissed or denied. What they uncovered was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. The corruption wasn't limited to expense fraud and embezzlement. It extended into every corner of the company. The executives had created a hiring system that favored friends and family members of other executives, regardless of qualifications. They had implemented a promotion structure that rewarded loyalty to the executive team over actual job performance. They had built a compensation system that paid executives bonuses based on short-term metrics they could easily manipulate, while denying fair raises to the workers who actually generated value. Marcus discovered that his executives had been systematically suppressing innovation. Engineers with brilliant ideas were ignored if those ideas threatened existing profit centers controlled by executives. Product development was steered towards safe, incremental improvements rather than groundbreaking innovations because executives wanted predictable quarterly results to boost their bonuses. The environmental and safety violations were particularly damning. Executives had cut corners on workplace safety to reduce costs, leading to a 300% increase in workplace injuries over the past 4 years. They had ignored environmental regulations at 3 facilities, risking massive fines and damage to communities. They had covered up these violations by intimidating whistleblowers and falsifying safety reports. But perhaps most disturbing was what they had done to the company culture. The values Marcus had worked so hard to instill had been deliberately undermined. The executives had created a culture where cruelty was rewarded, where treating lower-level employees with contempt was seen as a sign of strength, where exploitation was normalized and celebrated. Marcus found evidence of systematic discrimination. Women were passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified men. Employees of color faced barriers to advancement that their white colleagues didn't encounter. Older workers were forced out to make room for cheaper, younger employees. Disabled employees were denied reasonable accommodations and then fired for performance issues. The Human Resources Department, which should have been protecting employees, had been weaponized against them. HR didn't investigate complaints, they investigated complainers. They didn't solve problems, they eliminated the people reporting problems. The entire department had been transformed into a tool for protecting executives and silencing dissent. Marcus reviewed the financial statements with his attorney and a forensic accountant they brought in. The $43 million in fraud that Robert had estimated was actually conservative. The real total was closer to $78 million stolen through various schemes over 6 years. Shell companies received payments for consulting services that were never provided. Executives had family members on the payroll who never showed up to work. Equipment purchases were made at inflated prices from companies owned by executive friends, with kickbacks going back to the executives. Conference and travel budgets were systematically looted for personal vacations disguised as business trips. The paper trail was extensive and damning, but what truly shocked Marcus was discovering how many people knew about it. Middle managers knew but stayed silent because speaking up meant career suicide. Board members had received hints but didn't investigate because the executives ensured they received lucrative compensation and perks. External auditors had raised questions but backed off when executives provided plausible explanations and profitable ongoing contracts. An entire ecosystem had evolved to support and protect the corruption. And at the center of it all were 5 executives: James Hartford in HR, William Chen as CFO, Rebecca Morrison as COO, David Kim as VP of Operations, and Susan Martinez as VP of Legal Affairs. These 5 had formed a cabal that effectively controlled the company, while Marcus, the actual CEO and founder, had been relegated to a figurehead role. They had been brilliant in their strategy. They never eliminated Marcus completely because his name and reputation were valuable for the company's public image. Instead, they had isolated him, controlled his information flow, managed his schedule to keep him away from the actual operations, and ensured that he only saw what they wanted him to see. Marcus realized with bitter clarity that for the past 5 years, he hadn't really been running his own company. He had been a puppet dancing on strings pulled by executives who had built their own empire within his empire. But now he had the evidence. Now he had witnesses willing to testify. Now he had a complete picture of the corruption. And now it was time to act. Marcus spent 3 days preparing for what would come next. He coordinated with his attorney to ensure everything was legally sound. He worked with Thomas to arrange a meeting with all the former employees who had evidence to share. He contacted board members individually, carefully selecting the 3 who he believed had integrity and weren't compromised by the executive cabal. He also made one more visit to his mother. She was having a good day, lucid and present. He held her hand and told her everything. About going undercover, about what he had discovered, about what he was going to do. She looked at him with clear eyes and said, "Now you're my son again. Now you remember where you came from. Do what's right, Marcus, not what's profitable, not what's comfortable. What's right." On a Monday morning in late November, Marcus Chen walked through the front doors of Technocore Industries headquarters for the first time in 7 weeks. But he didn't look like the Marcus Chen who had left. He was 20 pounds lighter from the stress and physical labor. His hair was grayer. His eyes were harder. He moved with a different energy, not the confident swagger of a successful CEO, but the determined stride of a man who had seen the truth and couldn't unsee it. His executive assistant gasped when she saw him. "Mr. Chen, we didn't expect you back until next week. Should I notify the executive team?" "No," Marcus said quietly. "I'll surprise them." He went directly to the boardroom where he had arranged a special meeting. 3 board members were already there, the ones he had contacted privately. His attorney sat in the corner with 3 boxes of documented evidence. And sitting in the chairs along the wall were Thomas Williams, Robert the accountant, Maria from accounts payable, David from IT, Jennifer from sales, and 6 other former employees. Marcus had also arranged for 2 other guests, a federal prosecutor specializing in corporate fraud and an FBI agent assigned to white-collar crime. When the 5 corrupt executives arrived for what they thought was a routine board meeting, they stopped dead in their tracks at the doorway. "What is this?" James Hartford demanded, his eyes widening as he recognized several of the former employees. "This is accountability," Marcus said calmly. "Please, sit down. We have a lot to discuss." "I don't know what you think you're doing," Rebecca Morrison said, her voice tight with barely concealed panic, "but this is highly irregular. We're leaving." "The doors are locked, and there are federal agents in the hallway. You can sit down and hear what we have to say, or you can be arrested immediately. Your choice." The executives sat down, their faces pale. For the next 4 hours, Marcus methodically presented the evidence. He played recordings of executives discussing their fraud schemes. He showed financial documents proving embezzlement. He presented witness testimony from employees who had been abused, harassed, and illegally fired. He displayed the shell company records, the falsified expense reports, the discriminatory hiring practices, the safety violations. Each piece of evidence was cross-referenced and verified. Each claim was supported by multiple sources. The case was ironclad. The executives tried to defend themselves. They claimed the evidence was fabricated. They insisted they were following company policy. They blamed each other. They blamed market conditions. They blamed everything and everyone except themselves. But the documentation didn't lie. The witnesses didn't waver. And Marcus had one more surprise. You might be wondering how I gathered all this evidence, how I obtained recordings from executive meetings, how I witnessed events that happened when I wasn't supposed to be present. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn security guard ID badge. The photos showed an older man with a gray beard. The name read, Michael Chang. For the past 6 weeks, I've been working as a night shift security guard at my own company. I've experienced firsthand the culture you've created. I've felt the contempt you show to the people who make this company function. I've witnessed the systematic abuse, the casual cruelty, the complete disregard for the values this company was built on. The room erupted. The executives shouted denials and accusations. The board members demanded explanations, but Marcus continued speaking, his voice cutting through the chaos. You stole money, but that wasn't your worst crime. You stole dignity. You stole hope. You stole the future from people who believed in this company. You took something good and corrupted it from the inside, and you did it while I was too blind, too arrogant, too removed from reality to notice. He turned to the board members. I take full responsibility for allowing this to happen. I built this company but failed to protect it. I trusted the wrong people and ignored the right ones. That's on me. But now I'm fixing it. He nodded to his attorney, who began distributing documents. Effective immediately, all 5 of these executives are terminated for cause. Their severance packages are voided due to fraudulent activities. The company will be cooperating fully with federal investigators, and we will be reaching out to every employee who was wronged to make amends. James Hartford stood up, his face red with rage. You can't do this. We'll sue. We have contracts. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent, the FBI agent said, standing up, because I'm placing all 5 of you under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, and about 20 other charges. We've been listening to this entire presentation, and it's more than enough for warrants. As federal agents entered the room and began reading Miranda rights, Marcus watched the executives who had betrayed him being led away in handcuffs. He felt no satisfaction, only sadness. Sadness for what could have been, for what should have been, for all the damage that had been done. The arrests made international news. Technocore Industries stock dropped 23% in 2 days as investors panicked. Competitors circled, smelling blood in the water. Analysts predicted the company wouldn't survive the scandal, but Marcus had a plan. He had learned hard lessons over the past 7 weeks, and he was going to apply every one of them. First, he addressed the entire company in an all-hands meeting that was broadcast to every office and facility. He didn't try to sugarcoat anything or spin the narrative. He told them the truth. I failed you, he said, standing on the auditorium stage without notes or teleprompters. I built this company on values I claimed were sacred. Then I abandoned those values. I trusted the wrong people and ignored the right ones. I sat in my executive office reviewing reports while the people who actually made this company work were being abused and exploited. That stops now. He laid out his plan for rebuilding the company. Every policy would be reviewed and updated. Every manager would undergo evaluation. Every case of wrongful termination would be examined. Victims of discrimination or harassment would receive compensation and reinstatement if they wanted it. The compensation structure would be completely redesigned to ensure fairness. But most importantly, he announced a fundamental change in how the company would be governed. He was creating an employee council with real power, not just an advisory body. Representatives from every level of the company, from janitors to engineers, would have direct input into policy decisions. Every quarter, he would spend 1 week working at a different position in the company to maintain connection with the reality of how the company actually functioned. The security department was completely reorganized. Every guard who had been mistreated received back pay and compensation. Thomas Williams was promoted to head of corporate security with a salary commensurate with his actual value to the company. The broken equipment in the security booths was replaced within 48 hours. Marcus personally called every former employee who had been wrongfully terminated. He offered reinstatement, back pay, and compensation for the suffering they had endured. Not everyone accepted. Some had moved on and wanted nothing to do with Technocore. But many did return, cautiously hopeful that the company might finally become what it had promised to be. Robert the accountant was hired back as Director of Financial Compliance, with direct reporting to Marcus and the board. Maria became head of accounts payable, with authority to reject fraudulent expenses regardless of who submitted them. David returned to lead the cybersecurity team. Jennifer came back and within 6 months became a sales manager with a harassment-free workplace. Marcus established a whistleblower protection program with teeth. Any employee who reported misconduct would be protected by the company's legal team. Any retaliation against whistleblowers would result in immediate termination, regardless of position. The cleanup took months. 3 more executives resigned when faced with investigation. 7 middle managers were terminated for participating in the corruption or for abusing employees. Dozens of policies were rewritten. Hundreds of employees received compensation for unpaid wages or wrongful treatment. The company also reached a settlement with federal prosecutors. Technocore paid $78 million in restitution plus $45 million in fines. The 5 executives faced criminal trials. All 5 were ultimately convicted. James Hartford received 8 years in federal prison. William Chen got 12 years. The others received sentences ranging from 5 to 10 years. But the most important changes weren't in the policies or the prosecutions. They were in the culture. Marcus had learned that culture isn't what you write in a handbook, it's what you tolerate every single day. And he was no longer tolerating anything that contradicted the values he had founded the company on. 6 months after the arrests, Technocore held a company-wide celebration. The stock had recovered. Employee satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs. Innovation was flourishing again. The company had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. At the celebration, Marcus took the stage and called for everyone's attention. "There are many people who helped save this company," he said. "Brave employees who came forward with evidence, investigators who built the case, board members who had the courage to support doing the right thing. But there's one person I want to recognize above all others." He gestured to the side of the stage. "Thomas Williams, would you please come up here?" Thomas, looking uncomfortable in a suit instead of his security uniform, walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. "This man," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, "spent 6 years investigating corruption in this company. He collected evidence, he protected witnesses, he risked his job and his safety to expose the truth. And when I arrived as an undercover security guard, he recognized me immediately but didn't blow my cover. He let me see what needed to be seen. He let me experience what needed to be experienced. He taught me lessons I desperately needed to learn." Marcus turned to Thomas. "You are the embodiment of everything this company should be. Integrity, courage, dedication. I owe you more than I can ever repay." "You don't owe me anything," Thomas said quietly. "You just needed to remember who you were. The man who built this company believed in fairness and dignity for all people. You just forgot for a while, but you remembered. That's what matters." "What will you do now?" Marcus asked. "As head of security, you can shape this department however you want." Thomas smiled. "I'm going to make sure that every security guard, every janitor, every person in this company who works hard and does their job right is treated with the respect they deserve. I'm going to make sure that when my daughter comes to work here, she's working for the company you promised to build, not the company those criminals corrupted." The applause was deafening, and in that moment, Marcus understood something profound. He had built a multi-billion-dollar company. He had created innovative technologies. He had made himself wealthy beyond measure. But none of that mattered as much as this: the opportunity to make things right, to actually live the values he had claimed to believe in, to create a place where people like his parents, like Thomas, like all the employees who had been wronged, could work with dignity. Marcus never forgot those 6 weeks as a security guard. The freezing nights in the broken booth became a touchstone, a reminder of what happens when leaders lose connection with reality. He established a tradition that continues to this day. Every new executive hired at Technocore must spend their first week working in a frontline position, not as a publicity stunt, not with cameras following them, but actually doing the work, experiencing the conditions, learning what it means to be at the bottom of the hierarchy in a corporation. Marcus himself continues to work 1 week per quarter in different positions throughout the company. He's been a janitor, a cafeteria worker, a shipping dock loader, an entry-level programmer, a customer service representative. Each time, he learns something new about how the company actually functions versus how he thinks it functions. The company also established the Thomas Williams Award for Integrity, given annually to employees who demonstrate exceptional courage in standing up for what's right. It comes with a $50,000 bonus and recognition at the annual company meeting. Winners are chosen by their peers, not by management. Technocore has become known as one of the best companies to work for in the country. Not because of fancy perks or high salaries, although those improved, but because the company actually lives its values. Employees are treated with respect regardless of their position. Complaints are investigated seriously. Whistleblowers are protected. Corruption is not tolerated at any level. The company's success has soared. With a culture of integrity and innovation, Technocore has developed groundbreaking products and technologies. Employee retention has increased dramatically. Productivity is higher than ever. Turns out, when people are treated with dignity and respect, they do better work. Who knew? But Marcus's greatest satisfaction doesn't come from the stock price or the revenue growth. It comes from the small moments, like when he's walking through a facility and a security guard waves at him with genuine warmth, like when he visits the cafeteria and workers invite him to sit with them, not because he's the CEO, but because they actually like him, like when he receives emails from employees thanking him for creating a workplace where they feel valued. His mother passed away 8 months after the arrests, peacefully in her sleep. But before she died, she had one more conversation with Marcus. She held his hand and said, "I'm proud of you, my son, not because you're rich or successful, because you remembered. You remembered where you came from. You remembered what matters. You remembered that every person deserves dignity, regardless of their job or their wealth. That's the only thing that matters in the end." The Technocore stories sent shockwaves through the business world. Other companies began examining their own cultures. Boards of directors started asking harder questions. Employees became emboldened to report misconduct. Marcus was invited to speak at business schools, conferences, and corporate events. He always told the same story, the story of how he had to disguise himself as a security guard to see the truth about his own company. And he always ended with the same message. The view from the executive suite is a lie. You can't understand your company from reports and metrics and presentations. You have to get your hands dirty. You have to experience what your lowest paid employees experience. You have to feel what they feel. Because the moment you isolate yourself in privilege, the moment you surround yourself only with people who tell you what you want to hear, that's when corruption takes root. That's when you lose your way. He became an advocate for workers' rights, for fair wages, for protection against workplace abuse. He lobbied for stronger whistleblower protections and more aggressive prosecution of corporate fraud. He used his wealth and influence to push for systemic change. But he never forgot the lessons learned in that cold security booth. Never forgot the feeling of being invisible, of being treated as less than human, of watching injustice unfold and being powerless to stop it. Those memories kept him grounded, kept him honest, kept him focused on what truly mattered. 5 years after his undercover experience, Marcus was interviewed for a business documentary about corporate leadership. The interviewer asked him, "If you could go back and do things differently, what would you change?" Marcus thought for a long moment. "I wouldn't change going undercover. That was necessary. But I would change the 23 years before that. I would change every moment when I chose comfort over courage, when I chose reports over reality, when I chose to trust executives instead of listening to workers. I built a successful company, but I failed to protect it. That's a burden I'll carry forever." "What advice would you give to other CEOs?" the interviewer asked. "Get out of your office," Marcus said simply. "Go to where the real work happens. Talk to the people doing the hardest jobs for the lowest pay. Listen to them. Really listen, not just nod and smile. Because they know things you desperately need to know. They see things you're blind to. And if you ignore them, if you isolate yourself in the executive suite, you're not running a company. You're running a fantasy." As for Thomas Williams, he continued as head of security until he retired at age 65. His daughter rose through the ranks to become a senior marketing director. And every year on the anniversary of the arrests, Thomas and Marcus meet for coffee at the Daily Grind, the little shop where former employees had gathered to share their stories. They sit in the same corner booth, drink the same coffee, and remember. Remember the cold nights. Remember the abuse witnessed. Remember the corruption exposed. Remember the lessons learned. And they renew their commitment to never forget, never become complacent, never let techno-core industries drift back into the darkness. Because the truth is simple. No position is so high that you can't fall. No success is so great that it can't be corrupted. No values are so strong that they can't be forgotten. The only thing standing between a good company and a corrupt one is the choice made every single day to do what's right instead of what's easy. Marcus Chen learned that lesson in the hardest way possible, but he learned it. And in learning it, he saved not just his company, but his soul. If this story moved you, if it made you think about leadership, integrity, and the importance of treating all people with dignity regardless of their position, please hit that like button, share this video with anyone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us of what truly matters in life. Because the best way to change the world is to remember that every person, from the CEO to the security guard, deserves respect, fairness, and the opportunity to be heard. Thank you for watching, and may you always have the courage to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost.